Kasimov, right? He's the head of generative AI and FOW, which stands for Future of Work at DBS, one of the heavies in Asia Pacific. So ladies and gentlemen, it is time to talk where is it going with AI in finance. Please welcome our panel. Jazz, let's do this. Are you ready? Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. A very good morning. I'm just from GFTN. We are a global not-for-profit that brings together the public and the private sectors to advance inclusion and responsible innovation in financial services. It's my pleasure to host these three to talk about AI in finance. Let's start with introductions. Kenneth.
Hi, good morning everyone. It's lovely to be here at SuperAI. My name is Kenneth Gay. I'm the Chief FinTech Officer at the Monetary Authority of Singapore. So my role at the MES is really to work together with the industry to advance finance and technology sectors in Singapore. So MES, in case you guys don't know, we are the financial regulator. At the same time, we are also the central bank for Singapore. Right? We manage monetary policy via the exchange rate, the Singapore dollar. On top of that, we also have a mandate to grow the financial sector in Singapore, and this is the part of the organization that I'm at. AI is a really big part of our growth agenda for the financial sector. I'll share later on, but I see a lot of interest among Singapore financial institutions, startups in adopting AI, and we work very closely with them. I also have a passion for AI. I'm an AI developer myself. Spend my spare time, whatever little I have, trying to work with the latest models, the latest frameworks, and having a lot of fun in that process as well. So really happy to be here.
Thank you, Kenneth. Rajiv, you're one of the coolest titles I've seen. Please do share.
Thanks, Jess. My name is Rajiv. My title, very unique. I always get that question. Head of Generative AI and Future of Work. Why I work for DBS and why this long title is because at DBS we're convinced generative AI is going to change the way work gets done. So that's why generative AI, how do you transform the organization with generative AI, but at the same time, what will the future of work look like, and combining all those two things. So I've been with DBS for the last 10 years, and before that 10 years in consulting in Europe and in Singapore, and now leading the task force to transform the organization through generative AI. I'm not a technical person, so I don't write Python on my spare time, but I'm there from a strategy and transformation perspective.
Thank you, Rajiv. Annabelle.
Hi everybody, my name is Annabelle, and I lead the public policy team for Southeast Asia as well as strategic engagement at AWS. So what I do at AWS is basically engage with governments, regulators, customers as well, all across the Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific region, and talk to them about policy issues of the day, understand some of their concerns, their worries about technology, and then try and find ways in which we can then work with regulators and governments to build frameworks together and address that. I've been at AWS 6 years, and before that I was also a regulator. I was part of the Singapore government, working on privacy regulations, and also wrote the first AI model governance framework for Singapore back in the day in IMDA. So AI has been, I think, part of my policy journey for the last it's almost 10 years now, 8 years, and we've seen such a change and such an evolution. And I think it's understandable that as we get very, very excited about innovation, there are also concerns, very, very legitimate concerns that are being raised by regulators and governments everywhere. And I think if we can't hit the right balance between responsible use of AI and innovation, then it will never get used, right? I think that's how it is, right? So that's my mission personally, just because of where I'm from. At AWS, really happy to see many customers as well in this room building on AI. We've done a lot to try and help our customers be able to meet whatever requirements that they have for responsible AI, and that of course includes the financial services sector, which is, as we were just discussing, highly regulated as well. So.
Thank you, Annabelle. I think that's a very good way to start. Now, the journey of AI, we've discussed a lot on this stage yesterday, the evolution of AI through the flows of hardware, software, and data, from expert systems to identifying patterns to predicting what's going to happen next, then generating content, all forms of content, and we stand at the cusp of agentic AI. But how has this been mirrored by AI? And Annabelle, gave us a bit of a precursor to the financial services regulated part of the industry. Maybe starting with you, Kenneth, from your perspective as someone who's built AI, who's now in MES, how have you seen this evolution of AI in financial services, nuanced to the industry?
Sure. So if you look at the history of AI and the history of finance, actually the two are quite intertwined. Even, a few decades ago, in the 1990s, actually the financial sector was an early adopter of AI, and they used it back then, to carry out fraud detection and monitoring, early form of AI, machine learning, network analysis, and so on. And fast forward to today, the difference that we see now is that AI, has become much more pervasive. The use cases are much broader in nature. So the challenge there, of course, is that as my panelists have noted, the financial sector is heavily regulated, in pretty much every country, and especially so in Singapore. We take regulation very seriously because we actually view this as a competitive advantage for Singapore. Financial firms want to come to Singapore. They want to get regulated here because they know that it is a positive so-called signal, for them to better serve the financial sector. But what that means for AI is that any type of use case, especially if it's external customer facing, there needs to go through a lot of risk assessment, a lot of engagement with the regulator, a lot of guardrails being built in. All the edge cases, we have to put them through a lot of different tests in order to give the regulator enough so-called assurance. Right. What that means on one hand is that perhaps you may see AI adoption may not move as fast, at least on the customer-facing and in the financial sector compared to other sectors. But what that also means is that I think the financial sector has a lot of potential, to actually be a good test bed, a good innovation ground for building so-called safety, correct outcomes for AI. Because this is an area where natively all the stakeholders involved have a very strong interest, right, in ensuring the right, safe type of output. So that's in a nutshell what I see for the financial sector.
Thanks, Kenneth. I think on the panel, a good thing to note, we have the three key forces behind adopting AI. We have policy, finance, and tech. So we heard from the policy angle. Let's go to finance and tech, and maybe bringing you, Rajiv, into the discussion. From your perspective, how have you seen this adoption of AI evolve, from your days at DBS and from before as well?
So it's a journey. So at DBS, as Kev was mentioning, AI has been in the financial services industry for a very long time. But I think in DBS, where we started to double down on AI was in 2018, where at the time from the top management we said we want AI to be pervasive across the whole organization. We wanted to reduce time to value, so it used to take 18 months to build use cases from idea to deployment, and we wanted to drive economic outcomes. In order to do this, we said we're going to do three things. We need to review our tech platforms. We need to review our processes, including governance and how we're going to deploy this responsibly. And we had to have a people angle.
Yeah.
So that was our three focuses. On the people side, there was one part that was more technical, how you bring all the analytics, the data community together. But we look at it from a transformation perspective. So how you get data in the DNA of the whole organization. How do people think data first? When anything they do, they think data. They control tower data, launch a new product. How do I instrument data upfront? So, and that started in 2018. So what we managed to do is that we have 350 use cases, 1,500 models in production, and it's pervasive across corporate bank, retail bank, finance, risk, across the whole organization. Two is we reduce time to value to 2 to 3 months to build use cases. And finally, in our annual report last year, we said we drove $750 million of economic outcomes, and this year we're going to surpass the $1 billion. But all that journey so far was focused on traditional AI/ML. So 2023 came Gen AI. So we said we have we believe we have a competitive advantage. So let's build on that to drive scale. So we use the same principles. Is how do we drive value from generative AI? How do I industrialize this across the organization? I make access to LLM in a safe way. So I build a platform where every use case can use the same platform to build on top. Very importantly, how do I scale this responsibly? It comes with new risks. How do I do this? And finally, it's a people business. So how do I bring our employees along the transformation journey, but how also let the customers know what is happening? So those are all the questions we're trying to crack.
Thank you, Rajat. Annabelle.
I mean, I think from a technology perspective, so often we like to think about positive flywheels. And if I think back to 2016, I remember sitting in rooms in Singapore with like financial services industries, with banks, with insurers as well, and people were asking at the time, like, why should I even do anything with data? Like, I don't want to use data, I don't want to share data, I'm collecting data for a very narrow purpose, and that's all I want to do with it, and that's it, you know? And we fast forward, say, 2 years after that, and I think that's when there was a very big, I would say, well, we thought it was a hype cycle, it definitely did not die down, so a very big interest in the use of traditional AI. And a lot of people at the time were saying, well, really, now that we have the compute power, thanks to cloud service providers, including AWS, now that we have the compute power, we can do a lot more with data. Suddenly the possibilities look very, very interesting. But I think it really wasn't until generative AI, just about right now, really only 24 months ago, that I think that impact of AI and what AI can actually do beyond just, you know, basic, big data analytics. Really, I think for the man on the street, for the average consumer, they suddenly understood what the impact of AI was. And if I look at it from a technology perspective, that cycle's shortening because now, you know, we went from maybe about 4 years to 2 years, and now within the last 6 months, we're seeing so much excitement and interest around agentic AI. And obviously, it's a bit, you know, we're seeing it build on top of, you know, traditional AI, now generative AI, and the next stage, of course, is agents and being able to go out there, ask your agent to do the search, but then actually action for it on it for you. And so I think we see the technology evolution and how companies, organizations, individuals are adopting that. It's always going to be a slight lag time, but I think depending on the industry, the lag time varies, right? And actually, I think for financial services, despite being very heavily regulated, we've seen financial institutions often being forward-leaning in wanting to adopt technology. I say that for a few reasons. One, I think they have a lot of shareholders who are staring at them very carefully. It's a very competitive space, so you know, if your competing bank decides to do this, you might want to do something as well. But also because of the rise of the fintechs, right? The fintechs, in a lot of ways, were native, and so they move faster in certain ways. Obviously, still regulated, but it did create a big wave in the FSI sector. So actually, I think we've seen a lot of adoption in the FSI sector. I think the Japanese FSA, the Financial Services Authority, actually did a survey and found that 90% of Japanese FSIs are already adopting some kind of AI, probably more on the traditional side, as you pointed out. And then in Hong Kong, the regulators have actually found that the banks, 75% of their banks, are already adopting Gen AI, at least one Gen AI use case. So I think it's that kind of momentum that's really, really important to keep up. And from a technology perspective, how do we balance that in a safe environment? So I think there are a lot of sandbox examples, lower risk use cases to just get an understanding of what the technology is, what it can do. And then from there, actually then building the policy and regulation frameworks that are appropriate for those technologies. So it's really exciting. I see the cycle going, and I think for agentic AI, that's when we'll see really the commercialization, the full commercialization model for Gen AI actually play out for agentic AI.
Thank you, Annabelle. I think coming back to you, Kenneth, so of course within MAS, you're also trying to see how you can use AI, Gen AI in use cases, but also of course from the regulatory perspective, looking at the industry. Maybe do share with the audience a bit about how you're using it internally, but also how you're seeing it being used within the Singaporean financial services industry.
Sure. So let me start first with what we're doing within MES for generative AI. So for background, prior to taking on this fintech role, my previous role was in MES was doing internal data and digital transformation, where I helped to build some of the applications that my colleagues actually use in MES today. So the first use case I would say very similar to DBS, and in fact many other banks and financial institutions that I speak to as well. Many of them want an internal version of the GPT. Why? Because they deal with sensitive information. Their compliance, their risk will want to have some kind of oversight, some kind of assurance over where that information goes. So what we did at MES was that we actually use a so-called a self-hosted LLM, and which a few in fact, and we keep upgrading them over the years. I still remember the early days. For those of you who may recall, Vicuña was one of the first few that came up, and then some of the meta models after that, in between some other models as well. So we keep iterating, experimenting to see which so-called set of models best fit our colleagues' use cases, and we combine that with a variety of retrieval augmented generation tools connected to our information stores. MES, like other financial institutions, have lots of internal information, so we needed to undergo this kind of inventorization process, categorizing our different types of information, figure out what's the right data classifications. So that helped us to actually broaden the benefits of generative AI in the first instance for the typical type of broad ChatGPT type use case. Another use case internally that we find to be quite helpful is in the area of horizon scanning and risk surveillance. So what I did in MES was that I actually built like an information pipeline where we work with news aggregators to pump news information into a centralized so-called repository and a message feed, if you will. This message feed then allows us to be able to monitor news over a certain time horizon, find out what are the key implications, and then summarize them for our stakeholders. So every day, the management in MES actually receives so-called a set of news alerts that come out automatically in the morning. When they wake up, they can see what's the top information that's relevant to them. So this is another use case that we've built. And we've also built some tooling that allows our colleagues within the organization as well to interface with a type of chatbot to actually customize some of the alerts that they want to receive based on their topics. So now that's for MES. Coming now to financial institutions quickly, I would say for generative AI, the use cases in a few categories. Of course, the general productivity use cases like what I shared. A lot of them are also thinking quite hard about how they can improve the customer service experience using generative AI. Right? A lot of them want to think about, can I use text to speech to text or multimodal, so-called models, to actually improve their ability to understand what the customer wants, to be able to retrieve relevant past interactions with the customer so that they can actually better serve the customer. That's one set of use case. I also see a lot of interest in research and analysis type use cases. Quite a few there have employed agentic frameworks to actually retrieve information from different stores, orchestrate the research process, and come up with something that allows, again, the banks to serve their internal or external stakeholders better as well. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Kenneth. DBS GPT, Rajiv, do share with the audience how you've internalized and brought this out to the market.
So at DBS, we have two categories of use case. What we call horizontal, which is unlocking the power of generative AI for and unstructured data. Just remember what's unstructured data, generative AI, for all our employees, and verticals, which are use cases that will tackle specific personas. So from a horizontal, so DBS GPT, very similar to what MAS does, is your general tool. We can change models. We keep upgrading the models to the latest versions from any family of models. We'll give you read, write, summarize, transcribe type of capabilities, but also access to company knowledge. So how to retrieve this so we get our GPT to connect to multiple sources. But on a horizontal basis, one of the learnings is garbage in, garbage out. So if you index we thought, should we index all our SharePoints, all our storage across the board, but then we quickly realized if you have outdated information or conflicting information, and also we did the quality of, so the whole governance process that we set up to onboard knowledge to make sure the quality is there. But why is horizontal use case important? You see ideas of use cases that come up. So everyone start using it, and they each have their own way of using it. Then you find an idea in one area in our cash management team. Before they go meet clients, they ingest annual reports and ESG reports of the company, and they built a long prompt to find talking points or discussion points with the customer. Then we say, oh, they do it there, why can't you do it in another area of the bank? So it's an idea generation. So the impact might be not so deep, but the idea generation is very rich. And then the second category of use case are verticals, where when we started in 23 to build some initial use case, and in 24, we realized lots of those use cases were fantastic because we learned about the technology, but the depth of it was, it saves you 3 minutes there or 2 minutes there, which basically the impact is very minimal. You don't see the impact. So we said we need to really focus on certain personas and go deep. So build use case on top of each other. If you take call centers, it helps you live transcript, access to knowledge, automatically knowledge comes to you instead of going to look for it, it summarizes it automatically, and it generates a service request when needed. So the outcome of it is the customer service officer can have more in-depth conversation with the customer, so we can focus on the resolution, doesn't need to scribble or toggle many screens. So the quality of the interactions have improved. The percentage of resolution has increased in the first time resolution rate. And we save time, so it makes the CSOs more efficient. But we have 100 over use cases across the organization in operations, how you can scan a document and extract information to pre-input some information, to technology, to assisting coders in code generation, to testing scenarios, use case scenarios, to supporting our RMs to have more meaningful conversation, to making some of the admin work of our front lines less tedious. So it's quite broad-based in terms of types of use cases. Many more to come.
Thank you, Raju. Annabelle, from your perspective, what are the key enablers, and moving to blockers very soon, starting with enablers first, what have you seen enable these sort of transformations?
I think overall, probably the biggest enabler is being able to have, I think on one level, the top-down support, right, and push, but on the other level also, I think at a broad level, making sure that your teams, and I think we spoke a little bit about this, are thinking actively about how to use AI. It's almost like a grassroots build-up of what are these AI use cases, and I think you touched on that in your horizontal approach. And look, we've seen that, Amazon, obviously, we've used AI as a company for a long time. And I think the enablers are simply, the technology exists now. The CEOs basically told everyone, go and figure out how you should use AI in your jobs. We have S-team goals, so senior leadership team goals for, I think, at least the trailing 3 years now, that is like, how are you using generative AI in your work? What are the new programs that you want to put in place in each organization within Amazon to be more efficient? So I think that top-down push is really, really helpful. But the bottom-up push as well, getting people trained and understanding what AI is. So now for all of us, regardless of whether you're in a technical or non-technical AWS, you need to go and get AI Pulse certification. So you understand what is the technology, what is the art of the possible with the technology. We're lucky to have people who can develop applications for us if we can think of it. So really just having that kind of thinking about the use cases, having people understand the technology well enough to come together and actually propose what that use case is, and then work with the development teams to build it. So we're in quite a lucky position, and I would say those are the enablers, right? Making sure that you have that open culture of adopting technology, and also having that push from the top down, but also having the kind of capacity building and training from the bottom up to be able to come together and find those use cases. That's within an organization. I think external to an organization, probably the key enabler is knowing, having that regulatory certainty, knowing that you can do these use cases, you can implement these use cases without running afoul of a regulatory requirement. And I think that's where MAS has done an amazing job at ensuring that the conversations are ongoing, where there are higher risk use cases, there are sandboxes that people can experiment in as well. But I think that's probably across all industries as well, needing to have that sort of regulatory clarity and certainty. And then kind of the broad guardrails around responsible use of AI, balancing in its innovation again, right? So helping people learn about how they should. Gets complicated, I think, when you're basically empowering individuals to build these use cases, to propose them. So having the right governance structure, having the right people asking the questions of how do we make the judgment call as to whether this use case is risky? Will there be downstream impact? And having that be a multifunctional, cross-functional group that's not only the technologists, not only the lawyers, not only the compliance people, but all of them together, and probably throwing some ethics people and social science people into the mix to make those decisions and make those calls. Because I think the challenge is the technology always wants to innovate. The lawyer, the compliance person always wants to, minimize risk, and the ethicist or the social scientist is thinking about the big picture questions, but is very rarely actually deep in the technology. So having all those people come together and try and make those decisions, I think it's a big enabler for companies as well. We have that at Amazon to scale up.
Thank you, Annabelle. I think we'll double-click on two of the things she mentioned, but also do keep your questions ready, so shortly we'll come to the audience Q&A section as well. So double-clicking on two parts. One, the policy and the people side. We're starting with the policy first. I think she alluded to the leadership of MES in creating the guardrails. I think the project Mindforce, the feed principles, and many others. Maybe do share, Kenneth, and of course coming to you, Rajiv, next as one of the leading banks who's worked on these projects. How has that experience been in building these guardrails or enabling the industry to balance innovation and oversight?
Yeah, so I think from MES's perspective, we really see it as an example of firstly, consulting the industry and moving beyond that to collaborating with the industry. When we first started, our own AI governance journey, back in 2018, 2019, we just had a few ideas in mind that we wanted to share with the industry, right? AI should be fair, it should be ethical, financial institutions should be accountable for their outcomes, and there should be transparency. So we say, okay, we strung them together, we say FEAT, right? F-E-A-T, and we put up, these broad guidance just as a starting point to the financial industry, to get their feedback, and for us to iterate on financial institutions. How do I adopt it, these principles within my institution? So after that, we then came up with so-called a FEAT, so-called like a toolkit, a kind of an open source toolkit that financial institutions could take, and run in their own, adapt and run in their own institutions. This is so-called like the more traditional machine learning type model, so that it can assess it, on some indicators of, bias, ethics, and other, areas as well, fairness. So that's the next step of the journey. After that, when generative AI came on the scene, the financial institutions really formed this community of practice already. And the community asked, so generative AI is now on the scene, what should we think about next? How do we think about the risk? And that was where Project Mindforge came about. MES again brought the industry together and we said, how do we have this kind of explainer approach, on what the key, explaining the generative AI technology, explaining at a broad level what the risks could be, and explaining at a broad level, what sort of considerations that a financial institution could have. So from there, we released a white paper, back last year. And this year, what we're doing then is we're trying to double-click on that. Now, financial institutions are at the stage of actually building and deploying generative AI applications. They want more clarity around, what sort of specific features their guardrail should have, what are the specific considerations, for these teams. So on that front, we're trying to develop that into a playbook this year that we hope that institutions across different segments of the financial sector, whether it's banking, insurance, capital markets, we try to gather the key use cases, then we try to gather the key so-called like risk considerations for those and see how far we can push on this front in order to give them clarity in terms of what they should consider in deploying their applications.
Thank you, Kenneth. A very good example of the public-private collaboration across policy, finance, and tech. Rajiv, bringing you into this discussion.
So, the trade-off that we always need to do is innovation vs risk. So, and we work very closely with the regulators, especially in Singapore with NAS and all, is how do you take a risk-based approach based on principles rather than locking in regulation that will prevent innovation. So keep it fluid because we're all learning as we go, right? So the technology keeps evolving at a pace never seen before. So finding that sweet spot is very hard. So and we are financial services, so trust is at the center of everything with our customer. They give us their money to save keep, so it's really important. So we need to take really good care of the trust, but also finding the balance between governance and speed of innovation. So internally, people tell us, why are you stopping me from doing stuff? But that's the feedback that many people tell us. Or yesterday, I was going through some questions we received in some town halls on why can't I use tool A, tool B, or whatever, but to bring on a tool safely within an organization, make sure that data doesn't get leaked, that data sovereignty is respected, that the IP of our data isn't being used to train another model, contractually that we have the right clauses. It takes time and effort, so we need to pick and choose the right tools that we want to onboard. But once onboarded, everyone can use. So finding that balance between innovation and risk is, and then we review every single use case before they go into production. So it's a risk-based approach, so some lower risk use case, there's higher risk use case, we have different models. But maybe I want to talk a little bit about the people aspect. So it's a transformation. So we have 41,000 employees. How do we bring those 41,000 employees within this journey? So when I started my role in 23, end of 23, we had a transformation festival where we showcased all our innovation. The feedback, the tone of the questions I was getting was, what is this technology? Will it have an impact for me? There was a bit of a fear to. When we did the same festival, end of 24, there was a different tone. It was a sense of excitement. So when is this tool coming to me? I can see the benefit of it in my day life. Why can't I have it within my organization? So we see that the effort we put in to work with our colleagues, from the top management to as and when we roll out use cases to wide communications and trainings to the whole organization. As Annabelle was saying, it's not just data professionals, it's the whole organization needs to transform. We've also been transparent that it will change the way work gets done. Your job today might be a bit different tomorrow. And as we were rolling out DBS GPTs, someone came to me and says, hey, your GPT doesn't work. I asked him, what document should I bring to my customer meeting? I said, if it was a new colleague coming in, how would you ask that question? So, I'm a treasurer's RM. I'm going to meet a customer for investment product or whatever product you are. Say, ask the question in that way. He typed the question and then he got a perfect answer. So what I mean is, it's a new skill. Yeah. We need to ensure people understand how to use this technology. It's not just random question without context. So transforming that is important. And the second part, so upskilling our people. The second part is we're thinking of operating model. If one of the premise of this technology is access to knowledge is democratized, what would your organization look like? I think it would look very differently. So, simple example, we have 2 call centers, one for corporate bank, one for consumer bank. Tomorrow, could there be a customer makes a call and answer a corporate or retail customer if the information is at your fingertips? Same thing from a branch. We have corporate branches, retail branches. So we're not there yet, but that's the way we're thinking. How would the organization operating model look like going forward?
Thanks, Raji. I think you mentioned a few very important points. I think yesterday in a session there was a talk about techno-HR functions and bringing the human and the AI agent in the future together into one function. Bringing Annabelle and Kenneth into this, maybe starting with you, Annabelle, the future of machine-human collaboration, do share your thoughts and add on to what Rajiv mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think we're already seeing that, right? We're already working with AI, so we already have some initial data points. For example, we've heard from customers that as their coders, as their developers use like Code Whisperer, which is AWS's version of helping you write code, what they're starting to see is a change in the behavior of how the developer interacts with his colleagues as a result of having Code Whisperer generate that first cut of code. And it's very, very fascinating because so I think one of the stories that I've heard is, so typically if you're a junior developer, you come in, you're writing code, you're maybe not great at it yet. Your senior comes and comes and helps you, maybe like says, oh, this could be improved, this could be more efficient. But obviously, because you wrote that code, you're going to be a lot more defensive of it, right? There's a bit of ego there. You're like, no, I disagree. Maybe this, and so what apparently has happened is that now that first version of code, the very rough draft that's maybe not perfect, is being generated by AI. And suddenly you, as the junior developer, you're coming in no longer as the guy who's just written that first draft and is getting a bit defensive, but as the person who's critiquing that version of code that Gen AI has produced. So now you're actually kind of moving up the skills chain a little bit. You're not so focused on just creating that first copy, but you're actually looking at how to improve it. And you're now able to have a discussion with your seniors about that efficiency of this code that was written and how it could be improved. And the senior is coming in less of a critique now, and that relationship is less defensive and it's more open, and you're then collaborating better. And that's just a very, very fascinating example. We see that with developers. We also see that with, like, for me, I'm a policy writer, so I write as well. And that has really, really helped the process of actually being able to critique and push writing to the next level, because you're no longer the one having to sit there with a blank page trying to write something that people are going to tear apart later, criticize later. So it really shifts the mindset of how you're being productive, but also what your job actually entails. And I think we don't know yet, right? We don't fully see all the use cases, but I think having a good mechanism to be able to collect these data points and having the organizations prepare for that, I think DBS has done an amazing job having a future work role and function, because part of that is also understanding how the job is actually changing, and what that means for the person, right? Because this is ultimately a people problem.
Yes.
And I think in some ways it can be positive, and in other ways it could be challenging and negative, right? If people aren't willing to upskill, if they're pushing back against the technology that is coming, that's going to be a very, very different kind of conversation. So how do you build that into your mechanism, collect that data points, and help with employee sentiment and kind of employee productivity as well. So I think that's a big conversation. I feel I'm not the expert here, you probably are better at speaking to that, but I think that's just a couple of data points.
Thanks, Annabelle. Before I bring Kenneth in, we're running short on time, so I'll get his views, but maybe do keep your questions ready. We'll have runners in the audience with any questions that you might have. Maybe very quickly, 20 seconds.
20 seconds, future of human AI interaction. I think we'll see a lot more clarity in terms of our work processes. You see it in coding, whereby, I'm sure you guys here do vibe coding, right? If you just give it a few lines or 1 or 2 lines, the code's not going to be that great. But if you set it to work, over a code repository where all your readmes, your coding conventions, your system spec, design considerations are there, the code is going to come out better, right? And you can do, automated testing and stuff like that as well. Similarly, in the policy space, exposing, the AI to a broader pool of information, having these standard operating procedures there, having perhaps some of the team practices, work processes inside there is also going to improve not only the AI, but also new joiners to the team as well. Thanks.
Do we have time for a question? One question maybe, please. Any runner in the audience? The mic? I think there. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Over there.
My name is Komesh from KPTG from Bangkok. I just want to ask about the use case, the agentic AI use case. So what is the potential of the agentic AI use case for the financial and banking? Is there any customer-facing one that gonna happen soon?
Thank you. Maybe actually time for the one question, but views on agentic AI before we close the panel. So.
So agentic AI is there, and there are different spectrum of agentic AI, and I think Kenneth said customer-facing. From a banking perspective, we need trust and we are highly regulated. So one wrong answer will cause a lot of trouble for organization. So I think those are building blocks that you will use to get towards a customer-facing agent that will answer some questions. But I think a fully autonomous customer-facing agent, I don't think from a banking perspective we're there yet. We need to do co-pilots first, then expose simple knowledge, then we'll build simple transaction, more queries on your transactions, then you'll build on top of that maybe potentially low-risk advisory, but all these are building blocks you need to build to get that security before you can fully open to more wider spectrum of use cases.
Any quick remarks from either of you?
Similar, we'll see probably customer agents being the first kind of use case, or the lower hanging fruit use case is what we'll call it, where I think organizations can very quickly trial that already. AWS has, and many of our partners have offered these services already. I think what will be really fascinating, so Amazon just announced Alexa Plus in the US. So Alexa is, as many of you probably are aware, is the voice assistant. So you buy a little speaker, it talks to you. And Alexa Plus now has the ability for certain agentic capabilities as well. So you can now tell Alexa Plus to potentially buy something for you from Amazon when it runs out, or you could potentially ask them to book a ticket for you. And so I think we're seeing more and more of that agents in sort of your daily lives as a consumer. And then I think internally in operations, we're also actively thinking about how we can actually get more agents in there to maybe minimize or remove some of the more mundane or operational tasks that the average employee has to do, like file claims, for example, or book flights. Like if you don't have to do that yourself, or scheduling, if you can push that out to an agent, then everybody gets more efficient and more productive. So I think these are some of the initial use cases we'll see, but I'm very excited. We're just at the start.
Yeah, so just very quickly, AI is really being used for customer-facing applications, but the responses there are very tightly controlled and predetermined. So you need to map that very carefully, and that's why a lot of times you see when you interact with a chatbot, normally you have to select from a certain set of questions, and the responses are controlled from there. So this is a broader issue about agentic AI. Those of you who build agentic systems will know it's actually very hard to control the output. And a lot of times you have to actually constrain the output first so that you can have some happy paths, and then after that you explore the edge cases from there. And exactly as what Rajiv said, I think we actually have to go on this journey to build trust amongst all the stakeholders so that we can actually see agentic AI customer-facing applications in the future.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you so much. Do join me in giving a huge round of applause to the three speakers. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jazz. Great job.